Coming up on Tech News Today, how the NSA got caught violating the Constitution, the Ubuntu Edge's failure is a success, and Yahoo beats Google. All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, August 22nd, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Samsung, Galaxy, iPhone, and other smartphones are worth at Gazelle.com. And by ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it should be, anonymously and without oversight. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the code TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Maya Zactor.
And I'm Chad Johnson.
And this is the show where we keep you up to date on the most important stories in the tech world, put them some context for you, starting with the top 10 stories of the day in the News Fuse. An Electronic Frontier Foundation Freedom of Information Act request has declassified a U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court decision that declared some NSA data collection unconstitutional. The 85-page October 3rd, 2011 opinion by Fisk Judge John D. Bates ruled the NSA exceeded its authority in collecting upstream internet data. Bates noted that this was the third time the government misled the court in what data was being collected. The Washington Post reports the NSA put in a filter in response and destroyed the previously collected information. The Director of National Intelligence in the U.S. has also launched a Tumblr at icontherecord.tumblr.com, declassifying more documents.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Several of Apple's iCloud services went offline last night and affected almost 3 million users across iMessage, PhotoStream, Documents in the Cloud, Backup, and iPhoto journals, although Apple pointed out on its status page that outage accounted to less than 1% of users overall.
The crowdfunding period for the Ubuntu Edge is now over, and it missed by this much. That is, if this much means over $19 million. The project to build a superphone that dual-booted Android and Ubuntu Mobile raised $12.8 million. They were trying to raise $32 million. In an update, Canonical says that backers will receive their refunds within 5 working days.
Yahoo's #1 again for the first time since May 2011. According to ComScore, Yahoo had 196.6 million unique users in July, ahead of Google's 192.3 million. The data does not include Yahoo's recently acquired Tumblr blogging service. It also does not include mobile data.
Sports network ESPN President John Skipper told Bloomberg the company is considering partnering with an online TV provider to some of its more popular channels like ESPN and ESPN2. However, Skipper also said that whoever the company worked with would have to buy the whole suite of products. We're not going to offer one-offs, and said online providers would not get a break on carrier fees paid by cable and satellite TV companies.
Darn, I just wanted ESPN3. German automotive supplier Continental is working out a deal with IBM and Google for self-driving cars, according to reports. Continental is best known for making tires, but makes all kinds of parts for cars like batteries and disc brakes. The partnership with IBM and Google could be announced at the Frankfurt Auto Show in September.
Google wants to make it easier for you to just get home and unlock, not unwind, unlock. Engadget spotted a patent application today that modifies your smartphone's security based on your location. As an example, if the phone knows you're at home or work, you could just swipe to unlock, or set it so that the phone could require a passcode at certain locations that you think are insecure.
IDC has released its mobile phone tracker report for the second quarter of this year, and Windows Phone came in as the second place operating system in the Latin American region. It ranked second in Mexico for the second consecutive quarter, and in the most recent quarter was also ranked second in both Colombia and Peru. In other countries such as Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, Microsoft's mobile platform ranks third in the second quarter of 2013.
Weekly ASCII in Japan has a picture of 3 purported new iPhones, one of which sports the much-rumored gold or champagne color. Oddly, the gold iPhone in the shot doesn't have a full back. Does it mean the gold iPhone will be delayed? Is it a new, more open-air design? Is the picture entirely faked? How will we ever know? Especially now that the NASDAQ had to shut down because it had a processor failure.
There's a new Kickstarter for a smartwatch. No, wait, don't leave. This is a new one called the OMate True Smart. And it's a smartwatch that has a slot for a micro SIM, so you can connect it to a cell network without the need of a phone. The device has a camera, GPS, and is built on Android 4.2, so you can use lots of apps. The campaign has another 28 days to go, but has already surpassed its $100,000 goal by raising over $170,000. Early bird backers are promised a watch in November of this year for a pledge of $179.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by ProXPN. More than ever, your security is important. It's always been important, but I think it's on top of people's minds these days. And one of the ways to protect yourself online is use a virtual private network. VPN encrypts your connection from end to end so that the people out there watching your packets fly by can't tell what they are. And ProXPN is one of the ways I use, especially when I'm at a hotel like I was earlier this week on their Wi-Fi. I don't trust that. I don't trust who else is in that hotel hacking away on those networks. Use a VPN. ProXPN is global, works with almost any internet connection, creates a secure encrypted tunnel through which all of your online data passes 512-bit encryption, works by OpenVPN or PPTP. You can use it on your phone. You can use it on your laptop. You can use it on your computer. There's a new ProXPN app for Android now in the Google Play Store that supports OpenVPN. You can configure it yourself on Linux. I configured it myself on iPhone. They've got world-class customer support. Even Steve Gibson at Security Now gave it a great review. That's what convinced me. So go to proxpn.com/twit for more information and to sign up. ProXPN premium accounts are normally $9.95 a month or $74.95 for an entire year, but we've got a special offer. Use the code TNT to receive 20% off for the lifetime of your account. That's less than $5 a month on the yearly plan. If you're not satisfied, you can cancel within 7 days for a full refund. So go to proxpn.com/twit and sign up with the code TNT. And we thank ProXPN for their support of Tech News Today. Joining us now to discuss the stories around the round table, Paul Fidalgo, Communications Director from the Center for Inquiry, is with us today. How's it going, Paul? Good to have you on the show.
It's going very well. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm a longtime fan of the show, listen to it regularly, and I'm happy to be able to represent secularism and skepticism here, and I think we all have much to learn from each other, so I'm delighted at the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Let's start talking about the NSA request. A few people are starting to get tired. When you hear something over and over again, people just start to get tired of the news, no matter what it is. Let me tell you why I think this is important. This is the first time we have verification that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in the U.S. actually declared something unconstitutional. And that's a big piece of proof that the NSA has not always been acting correctly, and that they were collecting emails between U.S. people, even though previously they said they weren't. EFF filed that request under FOIA. Turns out that the NSA was tapping fiber optic cables coming into the U.S., but their collection method was bringing in what they said chains of transactions. What I guess is going on here is that they were going after emails that included a foreign target, but in the replies, right, in that chain of replies, that history, they were getting emails between people that had nothing to do with the original target. In the opinion that was written by Judge Bates, he said the court is troubled that the government's revelations regarding NSA's acquisition of internet transactions mark the third instance in less than 3 years in which the government has disclosed a substantial misrepresentation regarding the scope of a major collection program. He says, contrary to the government's repeated assurance, NSA had been routinely running queries of the metadata using querying terms that did not meet the required standard. The court concluded that this requirement had been so frequently and systematically violated that it can fairly be said that this critical element of the overall regime has never functioned effectively. The NSA says, hey, we're the ones telling you about this. I think that's the problem. In other words, you have proven in this case that the NSA cannot be trusted to supervise itself, because who knows what other violations might be happening that aren't getting reported. In fact, we do know, because Edward Snowden took it upon himself to tell the world what other things might not have been shown. Paul, are you getting weary or getting fatigued of these sort of stories? Or does this seem extremely important to you?
That's a great question, because I really was getting fatigued by these stories. And early on, I was one of those guys who was saying, we always kind of knew this was going on. Maybe we shouldn't be overreacting to this kind of thing. But zooming out on this from a public relations perspective, which is where I tend to come from, I think it's fascinating that this FOIA request was even accepted, that this even came out. I don't know how hard that is to do. But when you look at the fact that this came out and there's, the government is on the record saying that this has never functioned effectively. You have the mess over in the UK with the thuggery that is being done to The Guardian and to Glenn Greenwald's partner. I know they're not NSA, but it's all wrapped up in this entire scandal. I think it's telling that the government wants to have something out there that says, yes, you did something bad, you were being naughty, and we noticed. And we want folks to know that. I think it tells you that they are aware that the American people and perhaps folks in the government itself are starting to get a bit of a surveillance Patriot Act hangover. They're starting to feel the effects of this, and they're not comfortable with it themselves.
Ayaz, what about you? I mean, you and I are seeing these headlines multiple times a day. There was also a report yesterday from telecom sources telling the Wall Street Journal that during the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics, President Bush used his warrantless wiretapping powers to tap every piece of data going in and out of Salt Lake City.
Well, I'm just looking at these reports constantly. I'm weary. We've talked about this before when it comes to this, but looking at this idea that the NSA, they want to claim that they can police themselves by saying this stuff. A lot of agencies do this, right? A lot of associations say, okay, we will show you some data about ourselves. We'll make ourselves look bad. But the reason why we're doing this is that way nobody else can police us. And that's what it looks like they're trying to get away with. But to see all of the stuff that all the laws they've broken and all the rules that they've broken within themselves, it doesn't make them look good in any way, other than the fact, I guess, after all of this stuff was leaked, now they're like, oh yeah, we did do this. So now maybe, I don't know what kind of oversight you could possibly have on the NSA any further than it already has. But what would be the solution? To disband the NSA and put them in different parts of different alphabet agencies, or to have a new thing that's above the NSA? But wouldn't that create the same problems?
Yeah, it seems like it's a matter of not so much that we've been lied to as much as just withheld information from. So if you out somebody, hey, I found out that you did this, and the person goes, okay, you're right. That really did happen. But let me tell you, in the future, it won't happen again. I mean, I don't have any a semblance of satisfaction that that's actually the case. Just that they need to be more secretive next time. I don't think that's the right answer. I'm just saying. I mean, why would I expect anything different?
Certainly not something we're going to solve today, and it's an important issue, I think, to keep revisiting. We'll try not to beat it to death. Some kind of oversight that still preserves the NSA's ability to operate securely and secretly from the people they're trying to prosecute that need to be caught, I think is in order. But I don't know what shape that takes either. I think that's what everyone's trying to figure out. Let's move on. As we always do with these stories, let's move on to something not quite as depressing. Although you're a little bummed out about Ubuntu Edge not getting its funding, I
slightly bummed out. Yeah, the Ubuntu Edge, which, Tom, I know you actually backed. The Indiegogo campaign didn't make its goal. They were trying for the biggest crowdfunded goal ever of $32 million. They did raise $12.8 million, which is quite impressive. It was more than the Pebble Watch. But since Canonical did not make its goal, the backers will be refunded within 5 working days. Mark Shuttleworth penned an update to backers proclaiming the big winner from this campaign is Ubuntu. Thousands of you clearly want to own an Ubuntu phone and believe in our vision of convergence. And rest assured, you won't have to wait much longer. You won't have much longer to wait. He also says that he's going to be contacting its biggest referrers personally because they had a lot of traffic being sent by certain referrers. He says that crowdfunding is a great way to give consumers voice, and they might even try to do it all over again. Now, the Edge would have had some crazy specs, dual booting Android, Ubuntu Mobile, desktop component where you would dock it and you could have a full desktop experience. But there's an article over at ZDNet saying by Matt Baxter Reynolds, who said the Ubuntu Edge's failure was inevitable because it doesn't solve any problems that currently exist. He says it's not convergence. This is really a hybrid because this device didn't do either one as a phone or either function as a phone or a desktop particularly well in theory. Paul, do you think that the Edge was doomed to fail from the beginning?
I think it probably was in this form. And that's not to say that the overall concept is a bad one. I'm of several minds. There was a time when I really wanted that one device to rule them all. I think John Moltz has a piece about that in Macworld right now, and he gets it right. I've often felt kind of decadent about having all this junk, the iPad, the iPhone, the MacBook, the Kindle, and it feels like, one machine ought to cover a lot of that territory, but that's never really materialized. And so the idea that the solution to that might be an Ubuntu Android hybrid, that doesn't quite make sense to me. I think it's difficult to pull off, and I think a niche desktop OS forming the foundation of a one device is a little too alien. And like he said, it doesn't solve any of the immediate problems. Plus, look, it's a device that really appeals to sophisticated users, but it sounds like they're also trying to make it a kind of one device that has an appeal to a mass market, so folks who don't want a bunch of different things. So it's confused in who it's aiming at. But, I will give it credit. It looked completely badass.
I think that they succeeded here. And the reason I think that is they weren't trying to solve the problem of convergence. They were trying to get the manufacturers particularly to take a closer look at what Ubuntu looks like on a phone. They put Android on there as an enticement. And they touted that whiz-bang feature of, hey, it can ask as a desktop too, because that gets people attention. They put it at 32 million because that's exactly the amount that they would have needed to get this thing going without private funding. What they were hoping for, I think, was more enterprise customers would come in, and only Bloomberg donated in any significant amount. But Mark Shuttleworth is saying, look, this got the name out there. This got people to pay attention to it, and now we can go to manufacturers.
When I was looking at this, in that article by Matt Baxter Reynolds, he does mention that it seems like it had like a naming problem. This idea that it's a phone. If Canonical explained that this is a PC you can carry that also is a phone, maybe that would have made it a little easier to swallow. At $600 and whatever dollars it was, or like $730 to different price points for a phone, I think that gives people sticker shock. But if you said it was a computer that is also a phone, maybe that would have had a different play, because $600 for a computer is somewhat reasonable to a lot of people. So they might have gone, oh, okay, and it's also a phone? Or it's like, or even if you called it a mini tablet, I think people would have bought into that more than just saying this is a super phone.
But think about how many people in the general phone buying public would have to be educated on what Ubuntu is. I mean, that's a name that, sure, I mean, we can kick around, and to many people it's familiar, but not to like millions of people who would be wanting to buy an all-in-one phone/computer device. I think that's a really tough selling point for a lot of people at this point. Android took a while even for people to be like, ooh, isn't that like a geeky OS? I don't know. Maybe I'll just stick with my iPhone. Now Android has broken the barrier, but I don't feel like Ubuntu is one of those things that a lot of people even understand.
Well, that's true of Yola. That's the Sailfish OS. That's true of Firefox OS. I mean, any new OS is going to suffer that problem. I think what Ubuntu was trying to do is show off what it could do, and we'll see if it pays off, if this move actually ends up getting them any contracts with anybody, because when subsidized, that price of that phone is actually going to be very, very cheap for the power that you get. Let's talk about retail, because Apple's hired a guy for the Apple Store. This isn't going to replace the head of Apple Retail, though, right?
No, in fact, just Apple basically hasn't had a head of retail since last year when John Browett was asked to leave the company. And there have been a variety of rumors about, is there somebody internally who's the right person for the job to basically fill that role? So what they have done is hired Enrique Atenza from Levi Strauss. He is now the top director for Apple's U.S. retail market and focusing specifically on the West Coast, which is kind of interesting. This is according to sources with knowledge of the matter. Atienza served as the senior vice president of Retail Americas and Global Store Operations at Levi's. He's apparently not going to officially start at Apple until October. And he will apparently be working under Steve Cano, who was given a VP role in retail for Apple earlier this year. Cano reports directly to Tim Cook, so Atienza will report directly to Cano. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, if it really matters how the executive structure works here. But I wonder why focusing on particularly the West Coast, where it's not as if we have an absence of Apple stores in major cities. and then the U.S. market might look in during the holiday season and even through next year. Paul, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's a fascinating pick. I mean, not that I'm terribly familiar with the guy himself, but I used to work in an Apple store not too long ago, and the culture was changing even then. This was about the time that Ron Johnson was on his way out. And there was always this underlying ethos of doing what was right for a given customer, allowing staff to kind of be themselves and not be pushy, to serve as a kind of embassy for Apple, for the brand, rather than just being an electronics store. And that began to change when Johnson started to leave. And there was this palpable change in emphasis to numbers and efficiency, which resulted in, mini scandals about pay and hours and things like that. So I don't know what experience he's coming from. I didn't know that Levi's had stores. But the more that Apple retail can bring in folks who think more in terms of the high end, who thinks in terms of service, hospitality, diplomacy for the brand, and less like being a Best Buy or something like that, the better. So, to start, at least I'm encouraged.
Maybe how to pair a good pair of jeans with a new champagne-colored iPhone.
Or a watch, right?
Or with a watch, yeah.
Didn't they picked up an executive from, Yves Saint Laurent? Right? They picked up that. Apple did that recently. Now they're picking up somebody from Levi's. I'm just kind of curious if it actually is because of the wearable trend that's where everyone's forthcoming. They're like, okay, Apple's going to make a watch. If you're going to make this successful, you're going to have people that knew how to sell clothing. Right. Because if you're going to say, hey, wear these pair of jeans, they're exactly the same as every other people's pairs of jeans. There's nothing really special about it. How do you make that have a connection to somebody in a storefront? To have a smartwatch, if that's what Apple's planning, or if they're going to have another product, whatever it may be, you need to have this ability to sell it to people, even though there's going to be one from Google, Apple, from Samsung. Everybody's got one, at least rumored anyway. If they're going to bring these people in, they must be really good at differentiating themselves, because in that Apple store, not only is the store has been around for so long that people have copied the store design. So if they don't bring in fresh talent to make this feel like, okay, this is a wanted product, I don't know what else they could do.
I have to say that I don't know if it was psychosomatic, but when Brower was there, I felt like the store was a little bit confusing, not confusing, but it didn't seem as good as it used to be, and it seemed like it got better. Now the problem with the Apple Store, I don't think has anything to do with the retail strategy as much as it is there hasn't been an exciting new product that makes me want to go in there and hang out and look at it and play around with it. That's the biggest issue with Apple retail for me, and that's a bigger issue than just this. This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Gazelle. Gazelle's a great way to get some cash if you want to, find a way to get that new phone. You want to get something at that retail store. You've been eyeing it. You want some free, go sell your old tablets. They're buying tons of them now. In addition to the iPad, you can sell to Gazelle your Samsung, Google Nexus, Kindle Fire, Microsoft Surface, Asus tablets. Of course, they're always buying Samsung phones. They're buying Android phones. They're buying iPhones. They'll even buy broken iPhones and iPads. But the best part is you get a risk-free offer. You lock it in for 30 days. So you go right now with that gadget you think you might be wanting to sell, find out what it's worth, and lock that price down because it's likely not to go up. And then you have 30 days to figure out if you really want to get rid of it or get a new phone and transfer all your data over, make sure your new phone number is ported and all of that stuff. Then you send your old gadget to Gazelle, and they will pay you fast. They'll turn it around. They'll pay you by check or PayPal, or you can get an extra 5% if you use an Amazon gift card. So there's really, I use it all the time because I am lazy and I want money with little effort. That's what the American dream is all about. So go try out Gazelle. Find out what your iPhone, your Samsung, your Android smartphone is worth. Find out what your tablet is worth. Take a minute, go to Gazelle.com and find out. Sell your used Samsung Galaxy or iPhone today at Gazelle.com, and we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. Let's talk about Yahoo and Foursquare partnering up. Sarah, what's this? Or I'm sorry, IAS. I mean,
you want to cover this
I'll
one?
chime in eventually, but you can go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Thank you. I'll have right away as it is. Yeah. So BuzzFeed Business is reporting that Yahoo and Foursquare may be working on a deal. BuzzFeed says Foursquare is in talks with Yahoo to partner for the company's location data, and it's in the discussions right now are fluid, whatever that means. So that's what's happening there. There doesn't seem to be any mentions of acquisitions. It doesn't look like Yahoo's trying to buy Foursquare. BuzzFeed notes that Foursquare has collected about 4 billion check-ins and its integration with a large number of apps. It noted, Uber, Instagram, and more than 50,000 developers are using Foursquare's API. And also mentions that Microsoft's Bing already uses tips from Foursquare in its Bing search results. Paul, does a partnership between these two companies seem to make any sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense to me. Foursquare, when it first hit, it was one of those properties that made me feel like the old man on the internet because I was someone who never wanted anyone to know where I was at any given time. But it's obviously got this huge following, and I can't even begin to imagine the troves of data that it has on millions of people's whereabouts, rivaled perhaps only, by the NSA. I can understand why this data would be something that Yahoo would be salivating over, particularly, I know we're going to be talking about their ComScore results and how that doesn't involve mobile data necessarily. If they have a hole in their mobile strategy right now, location data, appealing to wherever you are, knowledge of your preferences and habits that you have volunteered, that data, and I don't know how much of it Foursquare is offering up, but that data is potentially huge for someone like Yahoo.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do use Foursquare. I use it judiciously. I'm very selective about who I want to share my location data with on the service. And I don't check in places where I'm extra sure that I don't want to be found. So I am careful with it. And therefore, the data that I have in there, I don't mind if Yahoo uses in aggregate anonymously. That's fine, especially if it allows for some beneficial service that might come down the line. I don't know what that is. But this is kind of, to me, a good example of using big data because you have full control over the stuff that you're giving Foursquare.
Yeah, Foursquare, it's certainly taken in quite a bit of location data. And I think the fact that partners for Foursquare are using the Foursquare backend, Instagram is a great example. I mean, not every single time I post a picture on Instagram, but the majority of times I also check in a location on Foursquare or something that's somewhat nearby. It kind of makes me feel better. Like even for myself, I can remember, oh yeah, that was when I was at that coffee shop in New York City. That was a fun day. So all of that information now, Foursquare has sort of flipped on its head because Foursquare is now this discovery engine. It's like if you were on the ground somewhere wondering where you should go, you fire up Foursquare. You don't even need to check in anywhere. Foursquare has already so much location data that it can now tell me, based on who my friends are and my past habits, I think you would actually really like this pizza place. And here are some of the Foursquare tips that other people have shared. If Yahoo can use that for some of its mobile efforts, and Yahoo definitely wants to get into the mobile space, there is no better company than the treasure trove of Foursquare data that's available now.
Yeah, now I'm just realizing that probably could help something like a Yahoo local search because then you have these things bumping up to the top. Obviously, their search results are powered by Bing, but they still control how that data is presented. So if they cross-reference it with Foursquare's data, they could give you a lot more things that are personal. If you tied it into Yahoo, you can see your Yahoo friends who are on on Foursquare. Maybe you could have more trusted reviews. The other thing about Foursquare is they have a very, very active community. You do it for fun. You check in, you leave tips, and you get this real idea of something instead of like just leaving a star or something. It's a different feel compared to other things. I was just, when I saw the story this morning, I'm like, I see these big names. I couldn't figure it out. I think that might be it. Maybe Yahoo Local.
Well, it's like Google's a GAT. It's like if Yahoo has something that's pulling in from Foursquare data, that's just more dynamic anyway. Facebook's check-in engine is, I don't know, it's alive and kicking, but I don't really see that many people using it. It puts Yahoo on a level playing field with these other companies without really even trying. Well, except for having to give Foursquare some money.
Yahoo's riding high, too, right now. They're #1 in the ComScore rankings, as we heard in the news fuse. 196.6 million unique users in July to Google's 192.3. Doesn't include Tumblr, so Yahoo's numbers could be bigger. Of course, it doesn't also include mobile, so Google's numbers could be bigger. Greg Sterling from Search Engine Land wrote an article about this for Marketing Land that I was reading this morning, and he's with us now. Greg, good to have you on the show, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Glad to be here and be audible now.
Yeah, we had a little trouble with Greg's audio earlier, but it's good. Thankfully, we've worked all that out. So, what does this mean for Yahoo? Because I know there was a little confusion over how long it had been since they were #1 before, but it looks like, according to ComScore anyway, it was May 2011. Right. How have they trended back up, or is this not a big surprise? It's been close the whole time.
Well, initially, I had some difficulty getting a hold of ComScore, and so I went back through the monthly reports, and according to my initial sort of review of the data, it was not it was 2008 was the last time I found that they had been #1, but ComScore corrected that later when I was able to speak to them. They've been pretty close since 2009. Yahoo's traffic has been much more volatile, and it only really blipped up once above Google in that February-March timeframe. Otherwise, it's been below until just this last report. So it's been trending fairly close, but as I said, with much more volatility.
Do you have any insight or any guess about what this could be? Is it just part of that volatility that happened to roll Yahoo's way, or do you think they're actually turning things around?
Well, I think that since Marissa Mayer came in, she's done a lot of work to upgrade the UI and user experience overall, and they put a lot of resources and effort into mobile, as you know. And I think that that's and Yahoo Mail, one of their big properties. So I think that those efforts have benefited them and generally elevated the profile of the Yahoo brand and perhaps improved it somewhat. I think that there's not a radical change that's happened here, but I think slow, incremental, positive change is in evidence. We'll have to see over time if this is sustained. But it's also worth noting that Yahoo was at the top of the ad focus rankings for ComScore as well. So not just the consumer data, but also the advertiser reach charts that they put out.
Which is a good thing for their bottom line. And if nothing else, I think it reminds people that Yahoo never went away. They actually have been here for years. This isn't necessarily a comeback for them. They just haven't quite been #1, but they've been immensely popular, even despite themselves in some cases.
Well, it's interesting because we live in this little tech commentator bubble, and so for many of the people, for many of us, quote unquote, Yahoo had fallen into this sort of second-tier status, and many people had written Yahoo off. So there is a bit of a comeback for insiders. But as you point out, for the general public, Yahoo never went away. I mean, I think the Yahoo brand and the Yahoo services have been, pretty consistently popular over time, and people aren't as involved in the inside baseball stuff as we are. If we have another minute, we should talk about mobile, though.
Yeah, tell me what you think about that, because that's sort of an unknown how that would affect things, because obviously Google has a ton of traffic on mobile, but Yahoo has some too.
Yeah, it's two comments. So Google is overwhelmingly dominant in the search category. I mean, Yahoo's apps are popular, and in news and finance and sports, Yahoo has a great deal of popularity. When it comes to search, there's no comparison. However, in the past, Google has had as much as 94-95% of the U.S. mobile search market. However, something interesting has happened, which may be more telling than even these ComScore data. If you look at StatCounter data, in the last 6 months, let's call it, Yahoo has been trending up and Google has been trending down. So we see Google off from its high by about 10 points, and Yahoo is up. So there's growth in Yahoo's mobile search share, even though they really haven't done a lot of work on the search experience for mobile devices. So they have a long way to go, but I think Marissa Mayer is aware, obviously, of that as a priority, and I think that there's a lot of room for growth. But Google is much bigger in the mobile category.
Be interesting to see if Yahoo has made any progress in that when they'll have multi-platform numbers coming from ComScore eventually. It'd be interesting to take a look at those. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Marketingland.com or searchengineland.com. Greg, is there anything else you want to tell folks about before we let you go?
Well, sure, but I probably don't have time to go into it, so I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thanks again, Greg. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I was renting a car to drive up to Petaluma yesterday when I was in the Bay Area. One of the things I struggled with, this is a total first world problem, so let me just preemptively say that, was plugging in my phone. Like, do I want to go with the aux jack or do I do the USB cable? Because then my phone would charge, and but do I have enough charge? Because doing the USB cable is sometimes wonky with the thing. Why couldn't I just set the phone in and have it charge right away, Sarah Lane?
Well, wouldn't that be nice? GM wants to solve your problem, Tom. I don't know if you were driving a GM car yesterday.
Kia, but okay. Yeah.
But GM is going to introduce wireless charging for smartphones in some of their vehicles next year, not the entire fleet, but 2014 GM models, in certain cars. People will be able to place their mobile devices onto a power mat surface. GM is an investor in power mat technology. So a power mat surface inside the car, which will draw electricity. The way it works is you have to have an enabled phone to be able to use something like a power mat. It contains a coil that can receive electricity from a magnetic field when placed on a power mat enabled surface. Wow, sounds great. Although GM is not the first to be doing this. Toyota put this technology, similar technology, in their 2013 Avalon vehicle. Chrysler has the feature in some of their 2013 Dart cars, like a compact car. But it sounds like, in general, this is one of these things that, as you mentioned, Tom, does come in handy. I've got a little USB jack in my car that I use for my iPhone, but it'd be kind of nice if I didn't have to have a cord sort of hanging out when I needed to charge my phone up in my car. And sometimes I take it out for some other purpose, and then I get in my car and I go, yeah, I forgot. Now I don't have the cable, darn. But at the same time, I kind of wonder, besides cars specifically, I mean, to have to put your phone on a power mat still almost acts as if you're plugging your phone into a specific jack in a specific place. It's not as if it's like wirelessly just charging in the air. So it kind of seems more convenient, but it's the same idea where it has to be on a specific surface in a specific place. I mean, do we think this is awesome? I mean, this is obviously a trend, but wires aside, how awesome is this really?
I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have this, by the way, this technology in 10 years when I buy my next 10-year-old used car. It's going to be very thrilling. But it's a step toward this kind of seamlessness, right, where you get in your car and rather than have to futz with all the, docks and cords and stuff, that you're not having to think about it, that you get in your car, it's in your pocket, and right now it's you plop it on the pad and it charges, and then maybe you have Bluetooth or something to interface with it. So I'm hoping that it's just a little bit closer on the road where it doesn't even have to come out of the pocket. It just senses that it's there, and then the only thing that you ever have to think about is to remember to actually bring your phone.
It doesn't seem like it would be a ton of convenience, because I know I've been looking at this wireless power thing for years, and it seems like for the most part, when they try to sell you these home products, you have to get this mat and you have to plug that in, and then you have to put your device on it. At that point, you might as well be hooking up a cable to your device. I think in a car, though, one less thing to carry with you, one less thing to break, one less thing to try to power. If you could do this in a way that you have good partners, and this is, I think PowerMat uses the Qi standard at this point. So there's a ton of companies that
there are quite a few competing standards.
They're
too.
supporting this particular kind of wireless power. So as long as they're not doing their own proprietary style thing, that would be kind of nuts, where you have to buy a special case and this kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be like the feature that gets somebody to buy a car, but it's one less thing to worry about. Although I would hope that whatever's holding the phone is strong enough that it doesn't slide around. That's my main concern about this. I don't want my when I hit the brakes, my phone hitting a console.
Put it in the cup holder. You have the power mat.
What are you going to do with your coffee?
I'm going to charge my coffee.
That's why you have two cup holders.
That's a stopgap measure.
And who drives with another person in the carpool lane these days? Come on, that's for environmentally friendly people. You don't do that.
You also have to have a phone that accepts this too. So it's like all the cars in the world can be like, we're power mat enabled. Don't you want this car? It's like, well, my phone doesn't have that special coil yet. So technologies have to talk to each other a little bit more. But yes, I agree. We are moving in the right direction. It's cool. It's cool stuff. It's just,
yeah,
it's getting there.
I like the idea. I like the idea for sure. Absolutely.
Baby steps.
All right, let's move on to the randomizer. Everybody in the chat room, when we put the straw poll up for the randomizer today, said, wow, this is a tough choice. I don't know which one to choose. But apparently they all decided the same. Number 3 with 9% was artist chip implant sends animated GIFs to his phone so he can store them in the chip in his arms. Kind of a gross video, actually. Scientists find PageRank type algorithm from 1941 that predated Google, and it's not like Google stole it. This is all part of a chain of research, but pretty interesting. That got 19%. And warp drive could become reality with quantum thruster physics, 72%. I think it kind of must have been obvious now that I'm looking about it. I mean, warp drive, real warp drive. Now, granted, the scientists working on this in a NASA lab at NASA's Johnson Space Center can only move a photon. And even then, they're not sure they've actually replicated the effect. But the idea is to use an exotic form of matter to cause space-time to contract in front instead of expanding behind, so that you can change your position faster than light, even though you're not violating physics by moving faster than light. But the upshot is warp drive. They got warp drive. At least it's theoretically possible.
I thought you were bringing us down by saying they only moved a photon. It's like, no, let's not bring it down. Because if this actually works in a larger scale, that would be absurd, right? That means we could do all kinds of crazy travel. Forget the Hyperloop. Oh, I can get there in 4 hours. 4 hours. Forget that. I got warp drive.
Yeah.
Like,
What can I
4
say?
seconds.
It sounds less like warp drive and maybe a little bit more like the Dune folding space.
Ooh,
So,
we'll need
maybe
guild
NASA's
navigators. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we're going to start mining for the spice pretty soon.
The quiz.
saying.
You are the Quizette's Hatterack, Paul.
Yeah, well, right? See? Yes.
The man who was foretold. Yeah, good stuff there, though. Check it out at space.com. Let's see what's on the calendar.
Well, the Moto X is available on all carriers tomorrow, although it sounds like Google's had a little bit of issues with the customized engraving feature. So you can get a Moto X, but your, to mom with love engraving feature will have to come at a later time.
Oh, Mom. So sorry.
I mean, you still love your mom. You
send her a
gotta
note.
Give her a nice email or something. She doesn't have enough of those.
Thoughtfully written email.
Yeah.
Always pleasing to Mom. Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
It's a message from Kyle in Jacksonville, Florida. He says, hey, TNT crew, just wanted to comment about today's show, I guess yesterday's show. When you talked about Netflix, My List Edition, I actually enjoy the change because when you go to the app or website, there's no way to easily get a list of all your favorite shows like you would when you browse on the Apple TV. If I have my favorite show that I'm watching currently and it's not on the top of the list, it's harder to get to. But hopefully with the My List update, all of my currently watched shows will show up on the front page and I don't have to browse around. Also, Tom mentioned he didn't use the queue at all. But those of us with kids will tell you that is a major help because you don't have to search every time for a show. All the shows, you allow them to be available in one place. Thanks, guys. So the Netflix My List feature, he seems to like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't trying to say that no one ever used the queue. I was just explaining that I don't. But Kyle brings up a good point that for kids, if you want to give them a profile, now that Netflix has profiles, and say, okay, here's your queue. Here are the things to watch. That's pretty great. That's good stuff. Thanks for the email, man. And that brings us to the end of the show. Paul Fidalgo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Centerforinquiry.net if you want to see what the organization that Paul's involved with does. Anything to promote? Anything to tell folks about?
Yeah, sure. I'd really like folks to get to take a look at the Center for Inquiry website. We advocate for science and reason and secularism here at the local level and around the world. And it's really important stuff, including things like fighting for free expression and freedom of conscience. So I think that's going to appeal to a lot of the folks who are watching here. At the website, I do a blog called The Morning Heresy, where I round up all the news and links that are relevant to our little constituency, and I pepper it with dumb jokes. So I think you'll dig that too. So come on down and check that out.
Is it inquiry or inquiry?
This is something I struggle with all the time. I prefer inquiry, but in order to be a little clearer, I say inquiry because a lot of folks say that. But go with what you feel. Use your gut.
Freedom of conscience, right there.
That's right.
Perfect.
That's right. It's your
Perfect
right,
example.
sir.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Don't
guys.
forget to express your conscience in our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. It's where you can suggest stories for us to use in the show. There's 17,000 people subscribed to it now. That's a nice number of people. You should be one of them. Go in there and submit some links and vote. Voting is important because when it gets 100 votes or so, we really do pay attention to this stuff. And it's helpful to see stuff all the time in there as well. So go check it out. Also, don't forget today is the deadline. You may be listening to this too late for it, but we are doing a listener co-host show. It's going to go into the feed on Labor Day, but we're recording it Wednesday, August 28th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're available at that time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, Wednesday, August 28th, and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, tnt@twit.tv, by the end of today with the subject line open mic. If it's past Thursday already, we're sorry. Your email was very important to us, but it didn't get to us in time because we had to make a decision and start scheduling this stuff. But I'm really looking forward to that. Jason Howell will be back on Monday, by the way. Alex Gumpel will be our TD, but a big hand to Chad Johnson overcoming some issues and challenges today. Appreciate that. Man, you can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, TNT@twit.tv, and you can give us a call, leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. Lamar Wilson will be our guest tomorrow, and Len Peralta will be here to illustrate the episode as well. See you then.
sore.
My
I see
kids'
what you
toys
did
are
there.
around here.
Thanks.
You went literal web on me.